Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and your week's going good and all that stuff, and you're following the 3 H's of the channel. And in this video, it's all about Wyoming, and apparently there is some really scary stuff happening there. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. This was something really weird that happened years ago. It was really early in the morning, or late at night, depending on your definition, at 3 a.m. Anyways, I was on Highway 287 in south central Wyoming. I was exhausted, and I had to get off the highway before I fall asleep or I crash. So I pulled off into a lonely BLM turnoff, Bureau of Land Management. Then, I lean back in my car seat and try to go to sleep. An hour or so later, I am woken up. My car is violently shaking. I think, oh crap, I must be rolling. I grab for the handbrake. It's already set. The car stops shaking. I get out. It's dark, but there's a sliver of moon. I have no idea what the hell happened. I turn my phone flashlight on and look around. That's when I notice that my car is parked backwards from how I actually parked when I pulled in, and it's covered in scratches. I still have no idea what the hell happened that night. To start off, I hate what people have done to a thing like a skinwalker. They'll post a really crappy JPEG and believe that this is what everybody is worried about or afraid of. But they're way more awful than that because they're simple and mistakable. Let me explain. Have you ever seen a deer at night? They have eye shine like every other animal. And if you're used to it, it's not surprising to see it. But here's the difference. I was near a fire once, and we were getting pretty drunk, and it was after a wedding on some land out in Wyoming. It's a ranch her side of the family had. It was really beautiful in the day, but dry and a little unforgiving. That night, I just happened to catch eye shine off across a depression, probably 60 yards away. I thought it was interesting, and I almost interrupted my friend who was talking to mention it. Then, it stood up. The eyes rose. They hovered for a second, and stood up even more. This deer quadrupled in height, just that easily, and just kept looking at us as others kept talking. I was screwed up enough that I just kept calculating. But then I saw it move. It didn't gallop. It walked like a elongated shadow, carefully and quietly, never going back down to deer height. I was completely frozen, still trying to understand what I was perceiving. It hovered next to a tree, I think, but it was so dark that I couldn't tell the distance. But I could see it occasionally blink, very slowly, until it suddenly stopped giving eye shine. All I can say is this: that thing was absurdly tall. It moved entirely silently. It saw us, watched us, and stalked us. It started out like it was a deer or something, until it decided to somehow change. I'm at home, 3+ states away in a major city, and I sleep with a semi-auto 12-gauge shotgun within arm's reach, because it scared me that bad. The woods are not conquered. You sleep in them at your own risk, and I will never go out to land like that ever again. This is my first time talking about this, so try to bear with me. I was visiting family in a small town in central Wyoming. I would say the name, but the town is small enough that there's a possibility that I could dox my family. Anyways, it was late at night. I was walking back from this local bar or pub type thing when I'm hit with a foul stench. It was like strong, headache-inducing alcohol mixed with rotting food. I look in the direction of the stench thinking, what the hell is this? And I see a person. No, not a person. A creature, perhaps. It was goblin-like, short, hunched over. Its head looked like that it was a combination of a person and maybe a carp. I don't know. It was just super weird and off-putting. However, it was wearing some kind of clothes. They looked basically homemade. As I'm staring at it, the thing catches my eyes. It sounded like it was trying to talk, but it was incomprehensible. I just turn around and I try to not run, but just walk away fast while keeping this thing at the corners of my eyes so he doesn't try to I don't know what his intention would be with me. The creature, though, rummages through its pockets. I was kind of afraid that it would be a weapon, so I hauled ass behind an alley and I turned around to see if it had followed me. It didn't. It was still combing through its pockets, and then it pulls out some kind of stick. It twirls the stick in the air and then puts it away, and then does something with its hands that looks like somebody turning an invisible Rubik's Cube. And I swear to God I saw a faint light coming from its hands. Then it says proudly, in English, "Thunderstorm," and then goes off into the darkness. The next day, there's an awful, awful thunderstorm with power outages and everything. I asked around, and some people have seen something similar. In fact, I learned from some people of the local tribe that they have a legend of what in English would be called the Bog Man. They can control weather, and they smell terrible. I don't know what the hell I saw, but it has to be the top of the list of the weirdest, and I mean weirdest things I have ever experienced, and I've been all over the country. My great-grandfather used to tell a story from when he was a young man in the early 40s in Wyoming. His dad was an officer in the army serving in the Pacific, and he was doing cattle wrangling. This is not uncommon for the youth of the time in Wyoming, for a family who owned a ranch a few hours away. Only 2 daughters were left with the older parents, as the sons had gone off to war. The father of the family was an upstanding member of the community in his early 50s. He was resting after having tried to track down some stray cattle. I believe that part of the story was fuzzy in my grandfather's mind. The detailed one was recorded on an audio tape somewhere back in the 80s when my great-grandpa was still alive. So with his horse on a corner of the property that bordered a large Native American reservation, he was doing this when a rattlesnake apparently spooked it, and it took off running back towards the corral about 5 miles away and over several steep hills. He didn't want to spend the night out in the elements waiting for a search party, so he decided to take what seemed to be the shortest route back to the ranch house, going down into the steep canyon nearby and following the creek down into the valley. He clambered and slid down the steep canyon wall before recalling that the father had given him and the other hired hands firm instructions to not enter this canyon, as it apparently had an aggressive bear, and he set out traps all over for it, making it very hazardous to be there. He was now sweating bullets as it was getting dark, and constantly reaching for his handgun he had on him with every sound. He had made it down to the mostly dry creek and started following it down when he smelled a foul stench. As he continued on, it smelled like a rotting carcass somewhere in the trees to one of his sides, and decreased the farther he got from that point. Then he smelt it coming up again, this time fainter than it would seem as if he had passed it already, and then another one was stronger. As he got near the end of the canyon, he saw something hanging in the moonlight from one of the cottonwoods that was along the river. He got close to it, and the odor was bad, but not as strong as some of the others had been, and they were farther away from him when he'd passed them. Apparently, he lit a match, a lighter, or something. Maybe the moonlight was good enough. This part is again fuzzy. And to his horror, he saw a decomposed human body hanging from the tree. He took off running in terror, and, in the wrong direction, back up the river. After a while, and stopping to get a grip on himself, he realized that he was close to another of the spots that had the strong smell. He knew it was probably a body, but he had to see. He apparently walked towards a nearby tree, expecting to find another body hanging, but instead tripped over, to his disgust, a bloated body on the ground. He apparently could tell that she hadn't been dead for very long, and she still had some recognizable features. She was apparently naked and had a large stick protruding out of her nether regions, looking like it had been pushed in far, far too deep, with the ground around looking like it had been soaked in an extraordinary amount of blood. He took off running back to the ranch house this time to alert them about the murders that have been on the loose nearby. It apparently wasn't until he was nearly at the house that he realized that it was probably the father of the family, as he had been the one to give such strict instructions to not go out that way. Apparently, Great-Grandpa lied to them about his route back. He had been specifically asked if he had come through the canyon, and decided not even to tell his parents, or anyone else for that matter. Some years later, though, he told some friends in high school about it. They decided to hike back to the spot and see if they could find any skeletons or bodies. And while they found some ominous signs, bundles of rope, glass bottles shattered around, and blood, they couldn't find any sign of the murderers. Unfortunately, people disappeared for all sorts of reasons back then, especially on the reservation or the communities around it, and no one really cared back then, so nothing came out of it. Great-Grandpa didn't really talk about it for years, until he was quite old, and apparently felt like it was haunting him. He confided in my grandpa about it. It's still a topic of conversation, and while Great-Grandpa died quite a few years ago, we've still tried to find out as much as we can about the man who owned the ranch at the time, and we wondered if we'd ever find skeletons if we went back and dug around. We have a good idea where the trees would be. This happened back in 2010, which doesn't seem like that long ago at all in reality, to me anyways. But Some really screwed up stuff happened that I'm scared to even talk about. I'm not even sure what it was, nor what happened anymore. I had to share this story somewhere, but I was too scared to even talk about it to my closest friends. Back then, I was 14. I was on a trip to Wyoming for a family reunion. The house is literally in the middle of nowhere. It's an old, mostly wooden but mixed with bricks house on a lonely dirt road that acts as an extension of a road that ended 500 feet back. On the other side of the road is a motel that's owned by my uncle. The motel has a gas station, a small bar restaurant type of room, like a regular bar restaurant but way smaller. Apparently, it's where they eat because the nearest grocery store is 57 miles away or something. We, at the time, were in Omaha, Nebraska, so the trip was long, but not that bad. So we arrive 1:30 p.m. We meet and have a lunch with the family. My dad's side, by the way. They're Finn in heritage. We decide to stay at the motel for the night. But then my uncle grabs me and my sister and says that we should stay out and sleep in the trailer with him, but doesn't explain why. We think this is weird, but we booked the hotel for the night. The old man hasn't spoken a word to us after this. I originally thought that this was going to be a very long week, and I was correct. In the middle of the night, I wake up. I see what looks kind of like a dark figure wearing what I thought to be some kind of fleshy looking mask, millimeters from the window that was mostly covered with curtains. Even though I just slightly opened my eyes, it somehow got startled, crouched, and ran away as soon as I saw it. I am absolutely freaked the F out. I can't call the police because the nearest police department is basically on the other side of the state out here, and there's no cell signal. I decide to wake up my sister and my uncle. My uncle just stares at me, worried sick. He says, "You kids must get out of here now." He took his 12 gauge, some supplies, and we took our stuff and blankets. We drive off. After an hour and a half or so of driving, we get to the end point. We end up in a weird mix of desert, hills, and forest. My uncle says that we should set up a tent and sleep there, and he will watch us for the night. He mentions that we have to leave our family be. Now, I am very worried. I feel like throwing up. I was lightheaded, and I passed out. A shit ton of adrenaline rushing through me constantly. The next morning, I wake up after an awful, awful nightmare. My sister is up, but she's panicking outside. I come out and ask her what's going on. She has a huge cut on her wrist, and her uncle is gone. The 12 gauge is gone too. We have no way of contacting our parents. We both start crying. After we calm down, we decide that we essentially have to live there until we can figure out something else. We gather all the supplies we can, and we can try and figure out something else, like live it out, wait till we die, or try to walk back home or drive. Both are not wise ideas out here. I bandage up her wrist. We have done nothing but play cards the whole day, and ate less. The next night, I experience the same nightmares. I wake up. The figure from the night before is outside our tent. I decide to pick up the big hunting knife and check it out. I go outside. There doesn't seem to be anybody there. I start searching. I feel this unpleasant smell, like sulfur and rotten eggs, burned tires, something like that. Eventually, I sneak up on a bush where a person seems to be hiding. I sneak up behind them and I stab them. It's the loudest screech I've ever heard in my life. It starts spasming. I didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed for like 10 seconds out of fear. I turn away and start running. It begins to chase me. I am screaming for help and crying at this point. I thought that this thing was going to kill me and that it's the reason why my uncle is gone. I turn and throw the dagger at the thing. The dagger hits it in the eye. It screeches and runs away, off into the distance. And this particular night, we had abandoned the tent and were sleeping in the trailer, so I went back there and woke up my sister. She said that she heard yelling, but it's like she wasn't able to wake up. I told her what the thing looked like. Very tall, slim, slender human, with weird, almost rotten skin, and his face was hidden by that weird, fleshy mask, some bits of hair sticking out as well. I asked her if this is what had given her the cut on her wrist. She didn't say, but she nodded. We pretty much stay holding each other for the rest of the night. The thing doesn't come back. At some point the next morning, we must have passed out. We're shocked awake by a knock on the door. It's our grandma. She has a black eye and looks a little worse for wear. I ask her what happened to her. She said that the family went looking for you and followed the dirt trails of the trailer. She said that the previous night she was trying to find us. She was walking down a trail when she was attacked by some screeching humanoid thing. Obviously, she ran away back to the safety of the motel. And this morning she followed the trail with her car instead of on foot. I tell her what happened to us. We get in her car and make it back to the rest of the family. Nobody has any idea where the uncle went. We got back to Nebraska earlier than expected, obviously. Our parents say that there was screeching and banging and scraping sounds in the motel all night. My uncle was never found. He's still missing. We contacted the authorities in Jackson, Wyoming after a long ride. I'm not sure, but I honestly think that he put us away from the motel because of that thing, and he may have been taken by it. I still miss him. I apologize for how disjointed the story might sound, but it was a very traumatic experience, and I'm just trying to get it all out the best I remember it. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own, or would you like to support the channel? I have links in the description, an email, a PayPal, and a Patreon that you can look at if you'd like to. But just watching the video, commenting, liking, and all that great stuff is good too. And I was going to make a joke about having never saw a single episode of Yellowstone, and then I looked it up and found that Yellowstone takes place in Montana and not Wyoming, so it kind of ruined that joke, wouldn't you say? But anyways, while I'm here, and since it happened just a week ago and I forgot to mention it, I had a weird experience while driving. Sometimes I go for a drive at night, listen to music to just decompress and all that stuff, because I don't mention it, but there is a lot going on in my life, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. But I go for drives at night sometimes to decompress, and I am going to turn at this spot because there's lots of, dirt roads and all that stuff around here. So I'm driving on a road that's partly paved, partly dirt, and I'm at a turning spot, And as I'm turning, I see a car drive by down the road going the opposite way from which I just came. And I thought, oh, that looks like somebody I know. So I just continued on turning. And generally, I think it took maybe a second or two to finish the turn, and then I was going back down the same way that I just saw the car go. And this is a straight stretch of road. And now there's just no car. It's not like scary or anything, it's just weird. And it happens all the friggin' time around here. We just call them ghost cars. And if you've seen one, it's like a rite of passage in the area. So, I just wanted to bring that up because it was something weird that happened, completely unrelated to Wyoming. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, and you're new to the channel, and you liked it, then I'll put up a couple videos right here that you can watch if you want to. Or, if you've been here for a while, even since the beginning, maybe you want to check them out again. But until then, I shall see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me. Thank you for watching.